writing the book was another part of that pivot. Now, like you, at the very beginning of all this, I'm a regular human, right? I was just like everyone else. I did not know what to do with my time. It seemed like waking up and it was like Christmas morning where you don't expect to do anything all day, but there are no presents to open.
You're listening to The Creative Imposter, episode number 98. Welcome to The Creative Imposter. I'm Andrea Klunder. I had the pleasure of briefly meeting today's guest, Ivy Summer, back around the holidays when she popped into one of our weekly creative co-working sessions in Chicago during her quick stay in town before traveling off to Greece, maybe with just a few international stops along the way, where she has just recently become a permanent resident along with her husband. But being a world traveler isn't the reason Ivy's on the show with us today. It's because she has been diligently building a business as a destination wedding planner. I know, travel and weddings, two industries that have been completely upended by this global pandemic. Fortunately, Ivy already had a couple of pivots up her sleeve when all of this went down. And I'm going to let her tell you more about that, as well as link to those pivots in the show notes for this episode at thecreativeimposter.com/098, linked in the episode description in your listening app. In this conversation, we also get real about productivity. And though it may look on the surface like some of us have it all together, plan, pivot, personal emotions, it's hard right now. And we all have our own personal struggles. Ivy wants to be really clear about that. And just to keep things interesting, she also answers the question, do people still get married during a pandemic? I hope this episode inspires some ideas for steps that you can take now to make your own creative entrepreneurial pivots. Here's my conversation with Ivy Summer. Tell me where you're tuning in from.
I am tuning in from northern Greece, my humble abode here.
Yes, it was fairly recently that you moved there, right? How long have you been there?
Well, I moved last February, right after Valentine's Day, and between the last Thanksgiving and like January, I was traveling all over as a true digital nomad. So when I met you, I did not have a lease or any permanent address at the time. Yeah.
Why Greece?
Yeah. So my husband is half Greek. And for years, he's been in the process of getting his citizenship here. And since we're married, since 2015, I have been slowly becoming eligible to get my permanent residence here, which I was finally able to do. It is 2020 now. That's like 5 years. And
Wow.
the day before the government shut down here due to the coronavirus, I was going to get effectively a green card. And worst came to worst, I was not able to get it. So I'm not going to be able to retrieve that proof of permanent residency until after the shelter in place order has been lifted.
When did they put that order in place in Greece?
This was just under 2 weeks ago.
Okay. And is that national or is that locality by locality?
It is a national order.
Interesting. So you're legit, but you can't prove that you're legit.
That is the issue precisely. I can't prove it, but the government can. But if the government stops me on the road or something, like they won't be able to prove it themselves. That would be my job, and I can't.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your creative work, your business pre all of this stuff. What is business as normal for you?
So business as normal for me is based in San Francisco and the Bay Area. It's a wedding planning consultation firm. I used to do full service wedding planning from over 12 months out from the wedding through the day of and even the honeymoon as a travel agent myself. just in the fall of 2019, I launched my online wedding planning course for couples who want to DIY with all of the resources and worldwide network of a pro. So this is a startup. There aren't very many wedding planning courses out there, let alone those that go really into depth about how to navigate the red tape of bureaucracy that you may not foresee dealing with, especially in a time like this with the shelter in place. The course includes 2 consultations with yours truly. It includes a consultation with a financial relationship coach, which is a super niche, a relationship coach who is also trained and licensed in finance, tax, and investments, who's able to help a couple have a conversation about the first biggest investment they're going to make in their lives. It's not a house, it's not a car, it's a wedding day, and how to navigate those conversations with family. And so as an on-demand wedding consultant, brides and grooms can call me up on WhatsApp or schedule a meeting on Skype or Zoom with me to ask any questions that they have and consult on whatever part of the planning journey that they're currently facing.
And are most of your clients then US based right now?
Yes, majority of them are.
I'm imagining that a lot of your work and your business is sort of disrupted by everything that's going on. I know that there have been people who had weddings planned where there's cancellations. I also saw friends who were planning to elope and have like a destination wedding who decided just to go to City Hall before it closed and just do it like quickly. And that seems to be a trend that's happening right now of people who are getting married in the midst of a pandemic, like it's a thing. Have
Yes,
you heard of
it
that?
actually is. So to give you a little bit of context, again, on a reason why I am here in Greece, not only for my permanent residency, but when I studied abroad in undergrad, this was 2011, I was in Italy. My heart is with them right now. I fell in love with Italy and Greece, and I don't know when I saw the wedding planner with J-Lo from like the 90s. I saw that and I was like, I want to be her. And little did I know at the time it was actually set in San Francisco. But
Oh,
I wanted to be this luxury, celebrity destination wedding planner, not in San Francisco, but somewhere abroad. And I finally landed my dream job here right before the shelter in place went into effect, based in Athens as a luxury wedding planner. And I thought maybe right now is the time, as a wedding planner who's working with both budget conscious brides in the Bay Area in the United States and luxury clients abroad. Why don't I write a book about how to plan a wedding in a pandemic? And I've actually started it this week.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're one of the people that I admire who are like, okay, I suddenly have time that I didn't expect to have. I have to stay home. There's no distractions. I'm going to use this to create something I've been wanting to create. Whereas I'm just like so unfocused. I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know how to structure my day. I think of all these big projects and plans that I could do, but then I don't feel like doing them. So I admire that.
Thank you.
So, what has had to shift for you besides thinking maybe now is the time to start this book? What has had to shift for you in terms of financial income, business structure, how you're approaching things? I know that you mentioned there's been some interesting pivots that you've been making. Fill us in.
Yeah. So, for one, having launched this online wedding planning course in the fall and not foreseeing the COVID-19 outbreak at all, the best pivot from full service wedding planning to virtual on demand wedding consultant from anywhere in the world was the best move I could have made at that time, so that I could be set up to handle any business that might come my way during the pandemic. Writing the book was another part of that pivot. Now, like you, at the very beginning of all this, I'm a regular human, right? I was just like everyone else. I did not know what to do with my time. It seemed like waking up and it was like Christmas morning where you don't expect to do anything all day, but there are no presents to open. And so I was like, I've got an online wedding planning course that has the content that I need. How do I offer something that's not going to be $1,000 or something unaffordable that people are actually going to read and consume and find value in right now. And I have never written a book before. I had been thinking about it since creating the course. And I thought, this is going to be the best thing. And the third pivot that I've made recently is partnering with businesses like mine to create a sense of synergy and direction, not only for the industry, but for couples. So in the Bay Area, cannabis is legal, and the Cannabis Wedding Expo is something that I introduced to California in 2016, and it's now an annual show. Well, what vendors can I work with from that expo and that network that we're able to collaborate and create something together that couples and industry vendors can use? Perhaps a Cannabis 101 series of articles that we can publish just on the brink of 420, which is about a month away from now. And so those are the three things that I've done to turn my wedding planning business into something that's a good fit for the time, for lack of better words.
Okay, I need to back up. What on earth is a cannabis wedding expo? I'm trying to put cannabis and wedding together and figure out what that actually looks like.
So imagine a wedding.
Uh-huh.
You've got the aisle, you've got the altar, you have the buffet or the butler served hors d'oeuvres and grand flowers draping across the altar. Well, if you might be able to incorporate cannabis into any aspect of a wedding. For example, the flowers, you can have a floral designer arrange cannabis buds to drape like grapes from a vine among the floral arrangements. Or you could infuse the food or pair the food with a cannabis strain based on your preference, based on what kind of ambiance or mood you'd like to set in the room. Just like lighting, it changes the space. It transforms the experience. But you could do the same things with cannabis.
Interesting.
Whether you consume it or not.
Wow, that's a whole niche I never even thought of. Super fascinating. I love it. So then how is business doing right now? With these pivots, some of which you made without knowing that you would necessarily even need to rely on them. Have things shifted? Have things been a little bumpy? How is it actually going?
So at this point, I still have couples who are invested in taking the course. What's really great is that even though I only have one couple of which I'm aware inside of the course who has told me, okay, we've rescheduled because we've had some issues come up with this coronavirus and the shelter in place. Outside of the course, I've seen couples who've invested in my consultation services who've said, you know what, we have to just hold off until 2021. And so each and every day, I'm seeing couples kind of contemplate and lean more and more towards let's postpone. And they're adhering to my advice of anything that's planned through May needs to be postponed for at least 6 months from now. And anything that's in June or July needs to be postponed until further notice. But unfortunately, it's not the couples making this decision of their own volition. They get a call from the venue saying, hey, we have to tell you about what we're doing about this coronavirus. Unfortunately, there was one couple where the venue had called them and the venue sadly regretted to tell them, we've canceled all of our weddings and we had to claim bankruptcy. So unfortunately, this is just uncharted waters. I've never had a venue call and tell me we have to close our business. And so
And we're not refunding you? Is that the other part of that?
Unfortunately, yes. Thousands and thousands of dollars they can't refund.
Wow.
It's sad.
Fascinating.
Scary.
Yeah. So how are you doing personally? I know that you probably still have family in the US. How are you doing personally being abroad in the midst of all of this and just navigating the day-to-day of being stuck at home and separated from family and all of that?
Well, I'm extremely lucky that my husband's family is here. His father is here in his house.
Oh,
Now, his dad was born in this house. This is like a
wow.
really old house. This used to be a manger for animals.
Wow.
So luckily we don't have to pay any rent. Let me tell you something else that I just can't make this up, you know. It was again the day before the government shut down and my father-in-law got a license as a grocery store, which he's just established. We have nothing in stock and we just got the license to buy food in stock for the grocery store. So we're really lucky as far as food and shelter are concerned. And my family back home, who I keep in touch with almost daily, is doing all right. I've been used to keeping in touch with them through FaceTime or through Skype or phone call ever since I moved here a year ago. So I really don't see a change. They're over in Ohio. And
Okay.
so ever since I started the business in San Francisco, you know, I've been away from family for quite a while, but it's okay.
And so, if you had your crystal ball and you could look into the future for your business specifically, and then also the wedding event planning industry at large, I'm sitting over here and my business is podcasting, my industry is podcasting. I'm looking at clients, I'm looking at trends, I'm looking at behavior and things like that. Can this have some net benefit, some opportunity for podcasters or for content marketers that want to create podcasts as part of their marketing strategy? Like, where are the opportunities? Where are the benefits? And then what are also some of the things that we need to be aware of that might change drastically moving forward? What do you see in the future of your business and also your industry if you could make some predictions about what the impact of this whole experience will be long term?
Right. Well, these are really good questions and pure speculation here. But, you know, if all goes well, as far as timing is concerned with this book and the publication of my book about how to plan a wedding during a pandemic, I would expect to see business on the incline for the online wedding planning course and for the virtual consultations. As far as the industry is concerned, I'm really, really eager to see what's going to happen because the way that people are planning weddings, if they're continuing to, now there have been some couples who just got married this weekend and are getting married this weekend in person with a crowd, okay, in the United States.
Oh,
Boggles my mind, but there are reasons to get married during a pandemic. So, at any rate, I think that for the industry, a lot of couples listen to other couples and their experiences with planning their wedding and what they've had to deal with. They look at reviews of wedding industry pros. And I think we're going to see a lot of reviews and a lot of reflection on what it was like to plan during this time and a lot of observation around, well, you couldn't meet in person with your vendor. So how did you do that? Are we going to see more online and virtual consultations on the rise in general because people know that now they can do it, that it's possible, that parts of their wedding weren't compromised at all by meeting their vendors online or through Google Hangouts or Zoom or what have you? So I'm really excited to see how the mobility changes between the couples and vendors. It's something that I don't think about every day right now because I'm just so consumed with what's going on and how I'm going to get by day. But it's a really, really good question that I rather just live my way into the answer because it gives us some insight, you know, whatever we can draw from how the industry is going to evolve because of this will give us insights on what changes to make to our business right now that's going to be really helpful for couples in the industry moving forward. So that's a great question. I'm going to think about that a little more.
What vendor would you not want to rely on online, like menu tastings and wedding cakes?
Yeah.
Unless they can send you a sample, right?
Which some
I don't know.
catering companies are doing right now. So I'm just floored. I'm really excited, but I'm also, you know, a little concerned because I just would never advise my couples to compromise on something like the food, right?
Right.
I can listen to a DJ online, sure, that's fine, but I have to taste the food when it's hot, not after whatever conditions it was in on the way over, right? There are absolutely some things that we can't really budge on. And I hope that couples don't cut corners because of that, who are still getting married. I hope that they don't cut corners during this time.
There's two things I kind of want to go back to that you just said that popped into my mind. One is that you said that there are reasons to get married during a pandemic.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Sure. So, in doing a little research for my book, I was looking up reasons why people would get married. And naturally, I came across articles that had to do with pandemics in the past, right? So there was the 1918 Spanish flu, and there were a lot of Jewish communities who married at the first sight of the plague. And in that tradition, those communities would mourn the death of its neighbors and then unite those neighbors' orphan children to get married in effort to be rewarded by the deceased, such that they would defy the pandemic. Really strange reasons, but they were referred to as plague weddings. And they weren't just for orphans or those in mourning. They were for underrepresented community members, like the disabled, people who were marginalized in society as a whole, were taken in by a partner who they married and were able to benefit from, well, the benefits of being married. So to share shelter legally, to have an estate, to be able to benefit from Social Security or like a pension plan or their assets, inheritance, all of those things. And more recently, in the 1960s, just the 1960s, it became legal. Well, it was declared by the Supreme Court in 1967, Loving versus Virginia. I'm not sure if you know about this, but it was a landmark case where the U.S. Supreme Court declared that interracial marriages were constitutional. I mean, people who were in interracial marriages, knowing that they might get arrested or the very real threat of consequential death just for getting married to a different race, and they still got married. I mean, so you don't even need a pandemic to have reasons against the odds of getting married. And I just find that really fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think when we think of like wedding planning and stuff like that, we think of all the romance of it, right? But then there's also like the economic implications and there's also the practicalities of it.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about the future of the industry and you were talking about online reviews of people who are still planning their weddings or still having their weddings and working with planners and making adjustments. And I'm thinking about, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, how you show up right now, both in terms of working with your clients and then also online in general with any like content or social media that you're putting out, I think is extremely important because it's going to reflect on you later in the future, right? And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts around how you're showing up as a leader in your space or what you've had to think about or are still thinking about in terms of the way that you present yourself.
Yeah. After I wake up and I'm like, what am I doing with my life right now? I remember people see me and they think wedding planner, checklist. Okay. So I've got to come up with a checklist. I've got to distribute a checklist for postponing your wedding in a pandemic and a checklist or instructions or tips or something about if under any circumstances, this wedding is just going to continue. What are they going to need to know? And a lot of it comes down to contracts right now. Is what does your contract say? If you signed any contracts, read them, talk to the vendor who gave that to you, check the force majeure clause, and that's an act of God. Now, sometimes that doesn't include a pandemic unless you specifically write out anything that's outside of anyone's control. And so I think that any vendor who doesn't have that kind of language in their contract, they're noticing that now and realizing what kind of impact it has on their business. A lot of wedding insurance companies are not covering any claims related to the pandemic. They are not covering those. And so couples are wondering, is it worth it to get insurance even. And I have to be here and remind them, yes, absolutely, it's still worth it. And these are those reasons why. And so at this time, I think my messaging really has to not only address what's going on right now. Everyone has got a narrow focus on what's going on right now. So I have to highlight the other important aspects of wedding planning and the changes with bureaucracy, changing your name on your passport, on your driver's license, getting your new social security card, all that stuff, and remind them there are other things outside of what you think is just affected, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be really hard as a planner to really know everything a couple is going through right now outside of the couples that we have who are planning for something really soon. And it's important for us to really get to know what and how those couples are thinking, to be able to craft messaging that speaks to them and speaks to them in a way that addresses their emotion. It is not the time to not send out that newsletter. It's not the time to take a break on Facebook Lives. This is the time to jump on and have live Q&A, because it is about just reaching out, whether it be by email or on Instagram or on Facebook or through WhatsApp or whatever method, to be able to respond very quickly to couples and what they need. Because it's not only about the message, but it's how you respond to it, including in a timely fashion. Everything is urgent right now. And it's a time for vendors and planners to be able to respond. It's not just about our messaging, but it's about how we communicate, and especially in a timely manner, because everything is urgent right now.
Yeah. How do you, I don't know if you have an answer for this, but how do you get inside of your clients' heads? I mean, maybe that's a very long answer, but in terms of trying to imagine what they're experiencing, what they're thinking, what they're going through, how they're feeling, do you have any tips or methods that you go about doing that? Or is it really just more of an intuitive process?
I have been hopping on phone calls with current and past brides and grooms and interviewing them for 15 minutes apiece. I'm asking them, what comes to mind when you think of wedding planning? What do you think are the pain points of planning? And these are questions that help me get in their head. What do you want that's going to set you up to plan successfully? It doesn't have to be a literal thing. It could be a concept, I want control or, I want knowledge. And seeing what words they use to describe what are the obstacles that they hadn't planned for or didn't foresee at the beginning of planning that they dealt with recently. What are some things they expect of a planner? What are some things they expect of a coordinator day of? And it's really interesting to hear the different answers, because I don't lead them on with anything that I do. I just want to hear what they think I do. It's like one of those memes of what my parents think I do, what my parents think I do. Yeah. And honestly, what I'm seeing is that a lot of couples will list maybe a third or maybe half of the things that a planner actually does, or that a day of coordinator should actually be doing. And so after I get to hear from them, just free talking, right? I get to educate them on what my job is really like. And then I get to hear from them, what did you think about that? I had no idea, or I didn't know who handled that. And so this is how you get into a customer's head, is simply by asking them questions when they're not consumed by the anxiety of being that customer.
Perfect. What is the best way for people to check out the work that you're doing, to get those checklists that you're creating, to find out about when the book is available? What are your best contact places?
My Facebook page, Plan Your Wedding Like a Pro, is the best place to get quick updates, live Q&As, and tips around what you should be doing as a couple during this time and beyond. You can find the website planlikeapro.rocks for a bunch of juicy information about what's inside the course. You can also find me on Twitter at @likeaprowedding and on Instagram at plan.like.a.pro.
Do you have any advice for a couple or someone who is in the midst of planning their wedding, or their wedding is already planned and they're kind of freaking out right now, or they're wondering, should I hold off? Should I wait?
Yeah. So my general advice here is that if your wedding is anywhere between now and the end of July, you should seriously consider postponing until 6 months from now, September. Any contracts that you've signed, look them over, speak with your vendors right away. I told you that horror story earlier about the venue going bankrupt and then telling the couple just last week. They filed for bankruptcy over a month and a half ago. So talk to vendors because, you need to be in communication. If you're not, then you would be, compromised. Other pieces of advice that I have at this time is to get in touch with your most important wedding guests. You didn't want to get married without them in the first place, so talk to them. And for those who are interested, I think that live streaming weddings is going to be on the rise. I think that 360-degree weddings are going to be on the rise. I would look at some of those options, especially if you're continuing to plan as scheduled and you have some guests who just aren't going to make it and would love to be included in some way, shape, or form.
Do you have any advice for somebody in a startup phase for their business, whatever entrepreneurial endeavor they have, and are trying to figure out how to make quick shifts?
I mean, I just wouldn't be anywhere without my community, honestly. Communities. I have several communities that I'm a part of, and I can't do anything alone. So I would say to anyone, definitely find your people in online communities right now, because people are offering all sorts of support to one another as the globe is trying to work together around a single cause. And so you're going to find mental support, physical support, emotional support, spiritual support, all kinds of support online. I'd really encourage people to stay in touch. We're social beings. If you're an introvert, all your extrovert friends need you right now. They're stuck inside and they're going crazy. So I would say find your people, stay in touch. This outbreak is not discriminatory. It could affect anyone. And so now's the time to tell your loved ones that you love them and to keep in touch. Bottom line.
Anything else that you want to share that comes to mind right now that you didn't get a chance to say?
My heart hurts for the world right now. It can be really hard to continue to feel motivated. I made sure I was together for this interview. But, behind closed doors, I'm human, man. Like, we're all trying to get by. And so I think that as long as we continue to support one another, I know some people have encouraged me, like, learn how to code or like pick up a new hobby. Those are things that, you can take and grow personally and professionally. And I think if there's that kind of energy in the world right now, that's going to make you feel better. Maybe not immediately, but it's going to keep your mind sharp. And we're all going to have a lot to share with one another once we're allowed to be face to face again. I think that's important to know.
Once we're allowed to be face to face again. The community thing is so important right now. I hinge my whole week on scheduled interview dates like this one and our twice weekly community Zoom sessions. I realized that I've been calling them Co-working Plus because they were originally inspired by our in-person co-working meetups in Chicago where I met Ivy. And we started with that core group of people, but now they've grown across geography, and they're really more of a social check-in to stay connected. The only real working part is to state one personal or professional productivity intention for the day. That's it. And that can be as grand as writing a book proposal and as small as taking a shower. I invite you to join us. They're free. You can get the details inside the Creative Imposter Facebook group linked in the show notes, along with Ivy's online wedding planning course for couples, Plan Your Wedding Like a Pro. Under normal, non-pandemic circumstances, the course is best described as a resource that gives couples the tools, insights, and vendor connections they're lacking so that planning their dream wedding can be as exhilarating as the wedding day itself. And right now, the course includes the tools and knowledge that you need so that you can create a wedding that includes as many people as you want. I cannot even believe I'm saying this, but right now, Ivy's offering 365-day access to the course at a steep discount as a service to couples who are being thrown into turmoil during this time. You can use the promo code COVID-19-2020 at planlikeapro.rocks. Again, that's COVID-19-2020 at planlikeapro.rocks, and the course will be just $50. That's like a 95% off opportunity. Ivy's forthcoming book is currently titled Poise Over Panic, because as we learned, people still want to get married during a pandemic. But when large gatherings are prohibited, what do you do? The links to all things Ivy Summer, of course, are in the show notes for this episode. And I also want to remind you that if you are planning another big life change this year, launching a podcast, perhaps, despite the crisis, I may not be able to help plan your wedding, but I can help plan your podcast. The easiest way to find out how I can support you in making a show that you and your audience will fall in love with is to book a complimentary 20-minute session with me at thecreativimposter.com/T420. That's TEAFOR20. You'll share your vision with me, and I'll share some ways I can help. Thank you once again to Ivy Summer for connecting with us from across the globe from her Greek manger turned apartment. Thank you to Edwin Ruiz for mixing, and to Jovia Armstrong for our theme music. I thank you so much for listening, and this week I'm inviting you to reach out and connect.